Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We are here in the 10th week of 2025 and with our 10th book of 2025. Although we started together, it's only 8th book so far, I guess, 7th, 8th.
Mm.
But for the last week, we read uh, The Heart of Darkness by Conrad, something Joseph Conrad.
Joseph Conrad, exactly.
Yeah, and it was quite an interesting read. I would argue was a stream of consciousness kind of read where the whole story was kind of like a narration by a person, the whole story,
Mm.
and it followed the theme of an unreliable narrator.
Mm.
So the story was set in, I don't know which year it was, but it was quite old during the period when Britain was colonizing the world, and the story surrounded around enslaving the people in Africa and yeah, how the life was for British who moved to Africa for business purposes and so on. So basically, it was an interesting read, I would say. How did you find it, Anup?
For me, it was I don't know. I didn't find it pleasant, to be honest. You know, the style, the writing style, how it was written, it was kind of confusing. And a lot of the times, I found the way it was written quite vague. I would
Mm-hmm.
say, but I thought like it happened in a certain way, and afterwards I read some other resources, and they also kind of actually approved my thought, my way of thinking. So
Mm-hmm.
now I know how the story unfolded. So it is good.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, the idea is good, but yeah, the writing style was something new for me.
Maybe you
I
can
would.
give our audience a typical Anup rundown of the story.
Oh, sure. Okay, guys, spoilers ahead again. Let's go through the story. At least of that, what I understood. You guys can read it and verify.
Mm-hmm.
um, so basically, we have like our protagonist who is a sailor, it seems, and he gets a chance, not a chance, but he wants to sail to Africa, and due to his connection, he kind of like gets the post for sailing in Africa, right? And it seems in Africa, the main business is about trading with ivory. I think that was it, right? So he gets the task to fix a steamboat which was stranded somewhere. I think, right? He goes there with his manager and some people to fix the boat and also to um, meet one guy called Kurt, I think. Kurtz or something like that, right?
Yeah, Schwartz.
Kurtz?
Yeah,
Like
Kurtz. Yeah, Kurtz. It was a
Kurtz, right?
German name. Yeah.
Hmm. So they go there and they also where they also get informed that there is a competitor
Mm-hmm.
who actually is competing with Kurt. Um, right, Kurt is one guy who is kind of a hero, right? Because he delivers a lot of ivories, I think, and
Mm-hmm.
people are like impressed by him. So they go there to find about his whereabouts, right?
Mm-hmm.
In their journey, they get attacked by a wild tribe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some of the people get killed, like I think also a black man, like
Mm-hmm.
the one who was steering the boat, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they go there and they find out that Kurt, like while in the initial phase, he was kind of a normal person, like normal in a sense of like he was living his European way,
Mm-hmm.
um, gets transformed into this wild tribe, so to say, right? Like integrates
Mm-hmm.
himself into this wild tribe, and yeah, then he's also not that muscular anymore. He was like rather thin, I think, and also
Mm-hmm.
ill. And yeah, later on they take him back in the boat with them
Mm-hmm.
um, to the port city, I guess, and then he dies. Afterwards, our narrator he goes back to his home city, and then he talks to a lot of different people, and also with the wife of Kurt, where he
Mm-hmm.
realized that as he was dying, he was calling her name, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's I think how the story ends.
Yeah, basically, it's a story of going. If it's a basic story of picking up a client, right? The
Mm,
narrator is assigned a task to go and pick this guy up in the heart of Africa, and then all everything he travels through is, and he sees the world outside of England, and all the trials and tribulations that he experiences is a part of his travel into the African continent.
was it mentioned which country they were in Africa?
I think it was hinted somewhere. It was in Zanzibar, which would
Okay.
be, yeah, modern day. It's Eswatini, maybe, if I'm not wrong. But
Mm,
back then it was probably Zanzibar. And if you ask me, I think this was a very interesting read. I also am not a big fan of the idea of an unreliable narrator, and the narrator kind of storytelling, right, where the narrator
mm,
embeds his expressions, his emotions into the text itself. I personally prefer where the text and the emotions of the narrator are clearly separated by those double inverted commas.
mm,
But this one was where it was like the writer was writing what somebody was saying word for word, and
mm,
because of the nature of how we try to speak with one another, we don't always write in a formal and descriptive manner to try to cover everything else. That
mm,
it felt kind of sometimes out of place. So I was also reading sometimes, and then I get confused what's happening because we are just moving from one place to another. Characters are not introduced. He's just reacting to whatever he's seeing, right? And then I'm kind of confused what's happening, so you have to go and
yeah,
read it again. So in that sense, yeah, it was not a nice read.
mm, mm,
I
mm,
have, but I think it was easier for me than you because I have read something like this in the past.
mm.
One book called Lolita, which is also in such a way narrated.
Oh no, come on. Lolo. I
Yeah.
think Lolita was written differently, man. Like,
No, Lolita was also written as an unreliable narrator kind of way.
mm, mm.
So it's written basically where the guy just explains his train
But
of
not,
thoughts.
but not as much as this, right? Because
Yeah,
there I could
of,
still like structure the scenes,
yeah,
like I could still
yeah,
say,
yeah,
okay, like okay,
yeah,
this happened and that happened, right?
yeah. Yeah, and I think that's something that's missing, and probably because the narrator does not give name to so many of the characters, right? There is like
Mm,
the director, there is a manager, but there's no name associated with them. And
mm,
even,
mm,
for example, the people who were the slaves or the black people there, they are also not always referred to as the name,
and word,
right?
yeah.
And
Mm,
then, no, I would say they are not distinctly identified because they are written as it, almost like a non-human way.
mm,
And
mm,
so, yeah, that was something quite fascinating to read. It was a bit of a difficult read, but I think once you kind of remove the onus to try to picture everything in your brain and just go with the flow of the writer, and that's what I did,
mm,
is that I don't think too much, try to understand everything. It's just go with the flow of the read. It felt much more natural, and then it was much more easier to understand. And I'm sure I have missed something along the way, but
mm.
it's still the whole story itself, it constructed pretty well in my head.
No, like fragment was I agree, right? Like so fragments were there, so you kind of like or my mind also interprets a lot of things,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
even if it is not there at the first place, like it tries to build a connection, right?
yeah.
So it was that, like there was this one scene, then another scene, and my mind was actually building somehow like the connection from that one scene to another scene.
Mm,
But it was not written in the story, right? So
yeah,
you don't know whether your mind is right or wrong.
exactly,
So
exactly.
you're kind of like left out like that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I I think the
yes.
intention from the writer was also that you put yourself in the place of the writer and not necessarily. So when you are traveling in a ship and then you meet strangers, you don't always explain how they look like or how they are there, right? Like in a typical book, you just see them and then they will have a specific form as long as they have a specific
Mm,
form. But if they don't look any special, then they will only look like brown hands and brown legs, right? Like the
mm,
tribesman, he explains. So basically, I think the narrator is going for. an experience for the reader themselves, where they can uh, get into the state of mind of urgency that somebody feels when they are traveling into an unknown place, I would say.
Okay. Interesting take.
Yeah. So, how did you find about the themes of the story rather than the structure and story themselves? So, it covered some of the, I would say, 100 years ago that were very
Mm,
common themes of savages and an imperialist UK trying to
mm,
civilize the world around them,
mhm.
and
But like
then
it kind of backfires, right? So yeah, like I read it somewhere else, but I found it the take interesting. Like if you have like this guy Kurtz who is going there, who is trying to civilize the people, but he himself gets, so to say, uncivilized,
yeah,
right? So he himself retransforms into his primal form, let's
yeah.
say. Yeah. So that was definitely interesting, I found.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that was something quite fascinating as well. I didn't quite like the racist undertone of the book, to be honest, but it is the theme of the books
Mm,
of those times. Like there, if you read,
mm,
I
mm,
think Sherlock Holmes is kind of unique in that way that he does not disrespects everybody from that era, right? But I think if we, I remember I read The Adventures of Robinson Crusoe when I was back and then other books as well of such kind, and especially the English books, they quite highlight about uh, people being savages, especially the people who are black and African, right? And especially the tribe people. And the one that I don't really like is how they label everybody as cannibals. And
mm,
I
mm,
think
mm,
in this story, the narrator does not explicitly shows a change in his heart about the opinion of these people, but
mm,
he is kind of questioning the beliefs that he's living with, especially when
mm,
the helmsman of his boat dies, and also when there's this big lady who comes to bid farewell to Mr. Schutz, right?
mm,
So
mm,
there was not so much critique of the story, but these elements where there's clear racist writing, where they are clearly saying like these peoples are subhuman and their culture are uh, inferior to, for example, the white culture. And I think
mm,
in order to justify this, the writer kind of takes a defensive note in the first page, I would say, where he mentions when Romans came to conquer England and civilize them, right? But I myself am a bit leftist in this opinion that there is not necessarily a civilized society, and that everybody's cultures, everybody's rituals, they are subject to the environment they evolved into, and you can't always civilize them based on one environment to another.
no, definitely. Like I think civilization and being civilized, it is also rather subjective, right? So what might be civilized for you might not be as civilized for me, right? So
Exactly.
I definitely agree with you there. Yeah. Besides that, I also feel that racism was not that pronounced, but maybe that was also not the intention of the author of this book, right? He kind of like just said, yeah, like these people they exist, right?
but
Without like,
but I think other than the narrator himself, everybody else was quite racist. The pilgrims were quite racist. uh, During while reading this book, I have been
but
is I
like
have
it was not pronounced, right? Like I mean, like they were racist, I
yeah,
guess. But it was like just like yeah, they said that, and they didn't like further delve into the topic, right, of them being racist,
yeah,
I what I meant to say is like it was written like how I think stuffs were written around
yeah,
those times. You know
yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
So it was like, yeah, there's N words,
yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, no, I didn't just mean from the N words. It's about how the black people were depicted in the story. For
Mm, mm,
example, they were always depicted as uncivilized and always depicted as violent. But think about it this way, right? I can give you a very easy parallel. There's a boat that comes to your country, filled with people you don't know, it's natural
mm,
instinct for us community to be defensive and try to attack it.
mm,
There's a similar parallel happening in US where people are deporting migrant people, and uh, I see the same parallels. It's the enforcement. Right now they
mm,
use guns and bombs. Back in the
mm,
days they were using bows and arrows, and just the tools they use should not uh, yeah, make them any less
mm, mm,
of
mm.
their desire for self-preservation should not be uh, reduced, right?
I get
And
a point. I get a point. But I think like the shooting with the arrow and bow thing, that was because of Kurt, right? Because it was he actually didn't want it to go back, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
it seems like later on, like the Russian guy,
yeah,
he actually unveils the truth, right? So he says like, yeah, it was he who ordered like the attack and stuff like that, right? So it was not particularly, I think, like the defense mechanism that we're talking about. I think that is there
mm,
definitely, but
mm.
I think in this story it was not there, right?
I felt at least before the revelation was made, the reaction
Mm,
from everybody in the
mm,
boat was kind of, how do I say, like, ah, these people are just violent, these people are savages, that's why we need
mm,
to civilize them, right? Not
mm, mm.
necessarily thinking into the way of how probably
Yeah,
somebody, if an alien came to
definitely.
Earth, how British will react at that
Mm.
time. So
I agree with you. I agree
uh,
with you there. There was
we
there
are
was this.
speaking in the context of the story, then yes, it
Mm,
was Kurtz who was probably the motivating factor behind it. But
mm,
before the revelation is made, we are
mm,
always the writer himself, but rather
mm,
through the dialogues of other characters, he's kind
mm,
of establishing the idea that these are savage people. And it's quite interesting is how the writer kind of feels that he has more in common with the black people, especially the ones
mm,
working on the boat who are working in the helms and other parts of the ship, because
mm,
this
mm,
providing, rather than the color of skin, they're providing valuable support to the narrator himself.
mm.
And uh, in a way, I felt this was a book where a bridge is trying to be constructed, but still there is gap to be made. I
Mm,
would say a
mm, mm,
plausible deniability to say that
mm.
yeah, these people are savages, so we need to civilize them.
There was also a bit of hypocrisy, right? So they were like, yeah, these people are savages and stuff like that, but they were like enslaving themselves, other peoples, which is actually in itself a savage act, right? But
Exactly.
also like the hypocrisy is also there, like where they go in Kurt's place and they see like this heads on the pikes, and then
Yep.
they start like, "Oh, okay, like this is like this is like really wild,
Yep.
right?" So yeah, similar to other books, I think like hypocrisy is also one of the themes here, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's quite interesting. Especially, normally I've only read or watched videos of history about this time, right? Not
Mm,
necessarily read. This is the first time I have read about the process of enslaving.
mm,
Normally, through Adventures of Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, I read the process of when the slaves are kind of being outdated, but
mm,
the process of enslaving of boats going to Africa and then kidnapping people there and then forcing them to do manual labor,
mm, mm,
chaining them and doing the ivory trade, using violence to dominate a group of people.
mm,
It's something that I have read for the first time, and it gave I would say chilling impression of the
mm.
time.
No, definitely,
Mm.
definitely. Also, the fact that they were eating like hippo meat and everything,
Exactly,
like
exactly.
was the first time that I've heard about it, And also, I knew that ivory trades were happening at that time, but I didn't know that it was this huge.
Oh, it was super big.
Mm. I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. That was also one interesting thing. For example, our writer gets humanity in one scene where he realizes that this guy, who's a black guy, is he wants food because he has not had any food at all. And
Mm,
there's this whole scene, if you remember, where he
mm,
kind of understands that okay, maybe he's not that weak, but rather that he's
mm,
just been underfed. And if I was to be underfed like him, that'd probably be the same way, right? Because at
mm,
the end of
mm,
the day, hunger is the thing that keeps you going. And
yeah.
if you're very hungry, then you would be very violent as well.
Mm,
And
mm,
there was something that I really liked, and in a sense, it kind of showed, I would say, a transformational journey without having an actual transformation at the end, because for us, the main motive of the story was not necessarily to look at the character development of the narrator himself, but rather to just go through, rescue the guy, not even rescue him, just pick him up, bring him back, and yeah, just write everything that he sees throughout the story.
mm, 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 yeah.
So, in the topic of this uh, savagery and labeling, uh, what is your opinion about it? Like, do you think that these are justified?
In what regard? Justified, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, so still to this date, we kind of label some group of people as savages, right?
Mm, mm,
Uncivilized, barbaric peoples, right?
mm.
And do you think it is justified in any way, or do you believe that the
No,
notion
no,
of a
no,
civilized and uncivilized community?
no, 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 definitely. It's as I said before, like it's the same with civilized and uncivilized. Likewise with savagery and being not savage. I think it's just like a subjective term.
Mm,
I mean, there are instances where like people in the Western society do something which we might find like a little bit of savagery kind of
mm,
stuff.
mm, mm,
And there are stuffs that we do in our like eastern part which the Westerners might find a bit savagery. One example would be that in like in Germany and in other people, like they have like these nude beaches where people go
mm,
and they're like just naked, right?
mm, mm,
So if uh, elderly woman and the man from Nepal they come here and they see that, and they're like, oh my god, these people are wild,
mm,
because they're like, just being nude, like in
mm,
front of all these people,
mm,
So they might find that quite savage.
mm,
And now if now the Westerners here they go back in Nepal and they see, I don't know, acts such as um, there's just like this festival, right, where a lot of buffaloes get butchered. What was it
yeah,
called again?
yeah. I forgot the name, but it's a famous.
Uh, the famous term that I've also forgot exactly. Yeah. And they might find that like really savage, or cool puja, right? Like when
Yeah.
we like cut the goats and like throw them from a mountain, a little hill, right?
Mm,
That might for them look like real savagery. So I think it is about like who is exactly like
mm.
judging.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's yeah. That's really how it is, to be honest. Because so these days I try to do. I play this game where all the rituals that come, either religious or non-religious, I try to rationalize them based on the needs of the time back.
Mm, mm,
And then when you try to think of it that way, then everything feels much more acceptable than rather when you're thinking it with the
mm,
biasness of your upbringing. Because I was also very biased in my thoughts that, yeah, I have, my culture is probably much more welcoming, much more civilized than everybody else. But
mm,
now that I look at this from the lens of a rational viewer, somebody who is trying to figure things out, it makes so much more interesting. The parallels of different societies which follow not the exact ritual but similar rituals, right? The festivities of all the societies which follow
mm.
similar rituals is something that's quite fascinating as well.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you.
But it was quite an interesting read, and uh, quite enjoyed the book, although it was a tough read. So,
Mm.
for the next week, what kind of book do you want to read? I have not made up my mind so far, but I
It's
just
it's your week. Welcome.
yeah, it's my week. But do you have any
No,
kind of theme in your mind?
no, no. It's
Do you
whatever
think
you want.
do you think it is suitable for us to now go to slightly longer books?
I think let's go to books of 200 to 300 pages, right? I think that much we can do now.
Okay, I think that makes sense. Uh, so there is this book uh, called The Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami. I don't know how long it is. After reading for so long something very concrete, something quite old, I think it
Mm,
makes sense to read something that is a bit more fascinating,
mm.
right? So I would recommend for this new week that we read Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami. What do you think?
Okay. Yeah, it's okay. I found like in Goodreads that it is 296 pages.
Ah, okay, that's quite long.
I think that should do. Yeah.
Uh, okay, then yeah, let's read Haruki Murakami Norwegian Wood, and then yeah, we can come back to next week with something more interesting. I want to read something that is a bit more comfort zone for me, something
Mm,
with not so much commentary and just uh, yeah a different read because so far we have been reading about I would say very heavy stuffs other than few stories in the middle
mm,
by
mm,
Sherlock
mm,
Holmes, right?
mm.
Uh,
Yeah,
so
I agree.
just to give you a disclaimer, Haruki Murakami is my favorite writer.
Mm,
If somebody asks me, like I told you previous weeks that yeah, my favorite books keep changing, but my favorite writer is Haruki Murakami, and I absolutely love him. I actually even have an autograph from him.
you told me that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah. So thank you very much, Anup. We continue again next week.
No problem. Thank you.
Then have a good day.
Bye bye.